The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 164.
Oi! Don't be scared. All of this is new to you and new can be scary. When people need help, I never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the latest episode of this current season featuring the 13th Doctor, titled Can You Hear Me? Can you hear me now? Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey. Can you hear me?
I don't know. I'm up in Montana. Our cell coverage isn't so good here. I think the Verizon guy got lost up here. How's it going?
Good. And Jimmy Aiken, how are you doing today, Jimmy?
I'm doing okay, and yes, I am old enough to remember those Verizon commercials, Can You Hear Me Now? But I don't know if all of our listeners will.
I know. Well, they probably know the guy from now the Sprint ads, which is where he does that. So, folks, if you're listening to this show in streaming or someone sent you a file, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the places you can subscribe to podcasts, and including our SQPN YouTube channel, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. I know the season is rapidly coming to an end, but we're continuing on. We do episodes every week of The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we go back and look at Classic Who, the 2005 reboot series. We'll talk about Big Finish audio productions. So we are all Who all the time on this podcast. So keep listening, even once the season is over. And we're rapidly approaching the end of the season, guys.
Three episodes after this.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how quickly that has gone. So let's talk about this latest episode we just watched, called Can You Hear Me? And I want to start sort of at the end a little bit, where I want to ask about something that is related to Classic Who, and that is we have encountered some Eternals.
Yes.
And have a mention of the Guardians.
Yep, right.
Now, these are not the Marvel characters, right? We're not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Who are the Eternals first?
So one of the villains in this episode describes himself as an immortal and says immortals have to play their games to pass the time. And he mentions then two definite and a third apparent immortal. The first group is the Eternals, and they are beings that, even though they can take human form and personify, they are eternal beings that exist outside, have existed for all eternity past. They're not God, but they are much older than this universe, and they appear in the episode Enlightenment in the Fifth Doctor's time. And at that time, when we meet them, some of the Eternals are having like an outer space yacht race using historical ships from different periods in Earth's history that they've retrofitted to fly in outer space, and the crews don't even know they're not on ordinary ships. They think they've got these like sailors from the 1900s, and they think they're sailing in the 1900s. But it's all for the amusement of the Eternals, who are kind of upper crusty and snobbish towards us mere ephemerals. The Guardians we've met on screen. There's more in the spinoff media, but on screen we've met two of them, the Black Guardian and the White Guardian, and they were introduced in the Fourth Doctor's time. So the Eternals were in the Fifth Doctor. The Fourth Doctor's time, they were introduced the Black and White Guardians in the Key to Time series with Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor, where the White Guardian commissioned Tom Baker and new companion Romana to go across the universe on a big MacGuffin hunt and find the 6 segments to the Key to Time, which occurred over the course of a series. Then the villain also, he says that this universe makes such a great game board, the toy maker would approve. And that is a reference all the way back to the first Doctor's time, when the first Doctor encountered a being in an eponymously titled episode, the Celestial Toymaker, who was this very powerful being interested in playing games. And all that episode, that story, almost had the Doctor's first regeneration, because the Toymaker at one point disappears the Doctor, and one of the ideas was when he reappears, he's going to have a different face. But they didn't end up doing it that story. The Celestial Toymaker was almost brought back because has been very popular, and was almost brought back in the Sixth Doctor's time, in Colin Baker's era, but the season got canceled that he would have appeared in. And there's a little bit of controversy these days due to wokeness about the Celestial Toymaker, because Celestial is a term that historically has been used not to just refer to things that are heavenly, but specifically to the celestial kingdom, i.e. China. And so the Celestial Toymaker is portrayed as the Chinese Toymaker. Right. And this wasn't as obvious in the black and white days, but the clues are clearly there. This guy is meant to have Chinese ethnicity. And that has distressed some moderns because reasons. You can't have a really powerful preternatural figure who's Chinese, apparently. And so I don't know about that. But I noticed they dropped Celestial here and just referred to him as the Toymaker. Also, in a spin-off media, the Celestial Toymaker has been portrayed as a member of the Time Lord race, and he, according to a lot of extended canon stuff, is portrayed as one of a group of Time Lords that later went renegade that all knew each other on Gallifrey, including the Doctor, the Master, the Rani, the Meddling Monk, and the Celestial Toymaker, among others.
Okay. Although other media have portrayed him as being from another universe and that sort of stuff too. Okay. Yep. All right. So that, I think I wanted to address that up front, because it's some fans, having seen this latest episode, are theorizing that the appearance of the Eternals and the Guardians, or at least mention of them and these Immortals, has something to do with the Timeless Child and the origin of the Time Lords. That there's some kind of, right.
See, I figured this was setting up for next season, because of course, as we see at the end, the Eternals don't go away; they're there, ready to go for next season. Right.
They are eternal, so they're the enemies that hang around. Okay, well let's get into this episode, and we'll bring up this fact of the Eternals and the Guardians and whatnot, where it's appropriate in this episode, then and revisit that. I will reserve my judgment on an overall what I thought about it. Although I will say right up front, because it'll come out as I talk about it, I'm generally positive about this episode, although it has some flaws, some structural flaws.
Yeah, it's got flaws, but this is more classic Who of you've got the monster of the week to conquer, and they're running around, and it's action, and it's spooky.
Travel through time and space.
Time and space. This is about as classic Doctor Who as you can get.
Yeah. I had in my notes space-time horror story.
Yes.
Which is basically what it is. And I haven't actually seen the Hellraiser movies, but my impression is that the Hellraiser movies involve similar stuff with different times, different places in space, and horror, obviously. Yeah. And when the villain, whatever his name was, shows up, I'm thinking, oh, he's like the guy from Hellraiser, only with tattoos instead of the spikes on his head.
See, I thought I was going to call this Nightmare on High Street, and there you go. And I thought he was like Freddy Krueger, except instead of having, metallic claws, he's got fingers that detach. So,
there you go.
But yeah, so it's a bit of a horror movie type of a horror episode, should we say, or that sort of thing. All right, let's get into the episode. We start in Aleppo, Syria in 1380.
Yay!
Yeah.
Love seeing Aleppo.
Yeah, and it's fun to get to a different time period. And we have this female thief, this woman who steals for her mental well-being, we're told. Although...
and the TARDIS does not translate a word in the dialogue for us. She's just been stealing in the souk.
Yes.
And not all English speakers are going to know that souk is the Arabic word for market.
Right.
Yep.
Or like the bazaar, the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it was a bit anachronistic, although we get a little bit of exposition later. But like, you said, I'm here for my mental well-being, or it's good for my mental well-being. And I thought, that's an odd, like that is such an anachronistic word choice for someone from 1380.
Not a phrase they would have used in 1380. Now, maybe they had the idea, the concept, but they wouldn't have used that phrase. That's a modern phrase.
They don't and this is a criticism I have of the episode in general. They don't do enough to establish who we're watching.
Right.
And what's going on. So really what's happened, this thief has come to a hospital that has a mental health wing. And the doctor later explains that Muslim doctors had a remarkably, for the time, enlightened attitude towards mental health patients, which is true. They would have like mental health wards. And so I liked in this scene where the thief is talking about monsters that everybody else believes are imaginary. The physician, the lady physician or nurse or whatever she is, see, there's more. We don't have enough of a handle on this character.
Right.
Says, I understand they seem real to you. And I liked the fact that this is in the Middle Ages and we have someone who's capable of being skeptical about unseen paranormal creatures. Because I like seeing that in this story, because the classic thing to do is everybody in the past was so benighted that they would believe anything about paranormal creatures and never think critically about them and never attribute it to someone's imagination. So I like seeing someone who's capable of recognizing, okay, you've got some mental issues and these are not real. Of course, they actually are in this case, but still, I like that.
There weren't roving bands of priests, at least in Christian countries, roving bands of priests doing exorcisms everywhere?
AKA the Witchfinder. Yeah. So we go from her warning to now it's night in this hospital in Aleppo.
Yeah.
And
by the way, we're not sufficiently woke in this episode, because even though we portray a Muslim community here in Aleppo, there was a major Jewish community here too, and also a Christian community, and we need proper representation.
That's right. Aleppo is not just a Muslim city in the past or the present. So we go to this nighttime, and the woman, her name is Tahira. Once again, had a lot of trouble figuring out what the names were they were saying on screen. I had to go to online to find out what the names were, but I called her the Aleppo woman. But Tahira is awake, and she encounters this woman, Miriam, in this hospital, and the creatures come. And I really like this, like the way they did this, where the woman Miriam is standing there and Tahira is looking past her at whatever it is. And this giant claw reaches out and just, as Miriam just sort of stands there, grabs her face. And she's just like staring. And Tahira says, what did she say? Don't struggle. They like it more when you struggle. And that's what, I mean, talk about creepy. That was really wild, creepy. So I thought that was well done. And then we go, and then of course, all heck breaks loose, and then we go to the opening credits, and we come back. We're in Sheffield today, the present day, and the doctor's brought everyone home for a day-long visit. And as we've seen in the past, the doctor without companions gets bored and easily.
She's also lying to the companions to get them off the TARDIS.
Yeah.
She's lying about what she's going to do. Apparently, she doesn't have clear plans, and she's just wanting them to connect with their lives, even though on Earth, even though she's going to be at loose ends. But she's actually actively lying to them.
Yep.
And that's something previous doctors have not done. in the same way with companions. They haven't just, I've got all these plans. I'm going to, go and have your anniversary meal.
Matt Smith.
We haven't quite had other than with like Rory and Amy, where they would go and have their own life and come back. Every time your companion would leave, it's like, oh, no, go ahead. I'll be fine without you. I don't need you. Go ahead. And of course, same thing. The doctor doesn't want them to leave.
Well, I'm thinking maybe more of classic doctors, but
okay.
Yeah, definitely in classic Who you don't see this.
Can't imagine Peter Davison doing that.
Right.
And that was, as I said before, that was my complaint with Rory and Amy and with Clara, where they were there was back and forth on and off the TARDIS, on and off the TARDIS, on and off the TARDIS.
And the doctor felt much more dependent on having companions around than they did in classic Who.
Correct.
Yeah, that's true. So she's so afraid of being bored without them that she's going to leap to the next day right away, and so that she doesn't have to have any time. As you do, which I suppose, And
she could have just been honest and say, you guys have a great day. For me, it'll be 30 seconds.
Right. But when she touches the controls, this guy materializes out of smoke briefly, and an alarm goes off, and the TARDIS changes colors, and then she's finds something in Aleppo has happened, and so she's going to go there alone without the crew.
Well, it's interesting, too. I think she was on the other side of the console, so she didn't even see him appear.
Right. That's important. Yes.
But he's clearly very, very powerful because very few things can get inside the TARDIS.
That's right. So we follow the companions. First Ryan goes to see his mate, who we've seen before in this first episode of the season.
This is another not enough character establishment because, yes, technically we have seen this guy briefly for about 15 seconds in one scene
of the first
5 episodes ago.
Right.
But they need some dialogue or something to establish that this is Ryan's friend, as opposed to a relative. Is he a cousin? Is he a brother? Who exactly is this?
And his
he
name
can't be Ryan's father because he's not old enough, but that's the only thing I could deduce about him.
Right. It took a bit to figure out who he was, but his name's Thibaut, and he's acting all strange and paranoid, and that's about all we get right off the bat.
But he's acting strange and paranoid with good reason, because there's been a guy who's invaded his dreams who he then sees all around the neighborhood.
Right. But that doesn't get
that sets up a problem that is going to be there at the end of the episode.
Right. But my a little bit of criticism is to go along with what you were saying is they don't really tell us that until later. We just get he's acting strange, and then we go off and we go to Yaz, who's now with her sister. Parents aren't around. We didn't want to pay the actors to be in this episode, and they're celebrating some sort of anniversary that is an uncomfortable anniversary. So we don't get much there. Then we have Graham, who's with his friends playing cards. And he says
for matches,
right, not for money.
They're playing for matches.
Apparently, he's told them he's going on cruises. That's where he's been.
One thing I like with Yaz is she's talking with her sister, and she says she doesn't want to be stuck in the past. And then, of course, the next scene is a TARDIS materializing in Aleppo.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice cut on concept.
Right. In fact, Graham tells his friends, traveling stops me from being getting stuck in the past.
It was Graham that said it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was about grace. Yeah.
But then as they're playing cards, Graham has a vision of Storm from the X-Men, who's apparently been trapped somewhere and wants to be let out.
And this is where we get the line, "Can you hear me?" That's the title of the episode. So the doctor shows up in Aleppo. The place is wrecked. The doctor is now. At first, I thought, are we just getting like straight up fourth wall breaking exposition from the doctor telling the audience how enlightened Islamic doctors were about mental health and whatnot? Well, they do kind of fix that a bit by saying, "Oh, here I am talking to myself. There's no one to give all these awesome facts to. No companions around," which is
when she has forgotten she doesn't have the companions with her, so she's just been expositing like she normally would.
Which is a nice little, as you say, Jimmy, hang a lantern on this. The fact that the doctor's constantly telling the audience through the companions all this background material, which is kind of funny. So
she then finds the thief of Baghdad. I mean, the thief of Aleppo, who is the only person to survive an attack by the creatures. And in fact, there's one left, and she points it out to the doctor, and the doctor turns around and looks up to see a ceiling-hugging monkey bear.
Yeah.
And later they give a name for the ceiling-hugging monkey bears, but they really don't need to.
Right.
Because as it's going to turn out, these are not an established actual species. So they're just these chimerical characters.
Right. In fact, the Sonic doesn't see it. So we have, right, like you mentioned, we go back to Graham, who's got this vision. We have Ryan's friend who's been having nightmares, who's seeing the guy from his nightmares in real life. And then Yaz and her sister again having their anniversary dinner. Then they watch a movie. Yaz falls asleep and has a nightmare where she's standing on a road in the country somewhere. We don't know what that's about. But then she wakes up to find the same creepy guy from Tebow's nightmares standing in her kitchen, staring at her, which is, that's kind of creepy. I'd say that's creepy.
That'd be pretty creepy.
It's also creepy whenever you wake up and you see someone standing there and then they vanish in black smoke.
That's pretty creepy. Yeah. I'd say that. Yep. So, excuse me. Creepy guy shows up at Ryan's friend's house, detaches his fingers, as I mentioned, and sticks them in Tebow's ears.
And we should explain how that happens. He loves doing this because it happens, I don't know how many times in this episode. In fact, it starts to get a little old.
Yeah.
They're obviously CGI. The CGI crew really enjoyed that particular effect.
Yes.
Yeah. He holds up his hand, and then his fingers start to rise off of his hand and his thumb just cleanly. There's no blood. There's no gore. They're just cleanly cut, and they just whoop, and they come up off of his hand and fly towards people. And in this case, in the bedroom of Ryan's friend, like a finger floats over to Ryan's friend and then lands in his ear, stump down, not fingertip down, but stump down, and turns transparent and starts extracting ink out of his head.
Yep.
Worst wet willy ever.
Dark colored ink.
Do you guys know what a wet willy is? It's a dad thing.
Yeah, oh yeah.
This is the stump equivalent of a wet willy.
creepy. So, and then he regrows the fingers. That's the other thing we have to mention. But so all the companions at the same time call the doctor in Aleppo to report their weird experiences. And so
she uses the Sonic to conference them into the same call instead of just pressing the conference call button.
Yeah, it must be one of those.
The doctor's still using the old school. Doctor's still using the old school flip phone. So
right, yeah,
she doesn't have a smartphone yet.
Yeah, that's one of those weird galactic calling plans. So the doctor then brings Tahira, the Syrian woman, with her onto the TARDIS to go check things out.
Also, there's a great line in that phone conversation where the doctor, after hearing what's going on with Yaz and Ryan and Graham, the doctor says, somebody's targeting us.
Right.
And that is scary because normally the TARDIS crew is the one doing the targeting. They fly in someplace and they go after the baddies. But if the baddies are going after them across space and time, that is scary.
Yes.
That is not normal on this show.
Right. It brings to mind the Master, but he's not in this episode, mostly. So the doctor, on her way into the TARDIS, finds some hairs from this creature that she collects and brings in there. And the TARDIS is saying, well, not only does it's not that it can't identify the creature, it's saying there's no evidence there. I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing there in this collection sample container, so I don't know what you're doing. And the doctor is perplexed by this. Yes. Yeah.
And so they want to go find the woman that Graham had the vision of. They want to go find Storm. And the doctor is like, well, do you have any idea of where she is based on what you saw in your vision? And Graham is like, oh, yeah, give me a map of the universe and I'll put my finger right. Of course I don't.
Exactly. I recorded that line because that was a great line. A great Graham moment. But I have no idea. And then and so what we have to have is the telepathic circuits make their reappearance here.
Yeah,
fun.
They've been used in Listen and for navigation purposes.
Yep.
They've been used in Listen, The Name of the Doctor, Dark Water, and a few other things.
Yep. So we have the TARDIS now. We're finally, the 5th episode, we're going into deep space with the TARDIS. Yay, we're off Earth for a moment. I just want to go places. It's a TARDIS.
I know.
Dimensions of time and space.
I think they may have made a deliberate choice to have this season be Earth-centric.
I think so. So they're on she says in the distant future they determined something to be a space station, a sort of monitoring station. And we have these two planets that are colliding, but being held
worlds
apart.
Collide.
Yes.
Worlds in collision.
Yes. And they're being held apart by something between them. And
it's a little Christmas ornament.
And they zoom and enhance over and over again until Graham sees this thing that he saw in his vision. And
I want to compliment their user interface because it's creative. It's not particularly practical, but it's creative.
Yes.
The user interface for this visual system consists of harp strings, and you brush the harp strings with your fingers to zoom in or out.
That was original. That was original. Yeah. They determined that it's inside this thing between these two planets is the woman that Graham has been seeing in his vision. She's apparently some kind of prisoner in there, and so if there's a prisoner, then the doctor
gotta let him out. That's what you do on this show.
Yep, that's what we do. And so
don't even question if there's a good reason for them being in there.
And meanwhile, Yaz is looking around, finds that creepy guy fingers are feeding a psychic signal to the girl in the bubble, which they assume is some kind of torture, that it's feeding her the nightmares.
And that could have been clearer. That was not real clear to me.
Yeah, in fact, only in retrospect does that become clear. Meanwhile, Tahira, the Syrian girl, wanders off and finds everybody who's been kidnapped, and the creature from her nightmare, and creepy dude, who sends his fingers at the companions, who all end up in nightmares of their own. So they're Yaz.
Everybody but the doctor.
Everybody, just the companions at this point.
Who also has failed to notice that her companions have gone missing again.
Again. Doctor, you have a duty of care, Doctor. So Yaz has her nightmare about seeing her sister on a road, and then she's alone.
And there's a policewoman there, too, who was also there in the first nightmare, which wasn't actually really nightmarish, just kind of dramatic standing on a road. But in this one, her sister verbally abuses her. Yeah,
I have a theory about Yaz's nightmare, which I'll get to as when that becomes at the climax of the episode. Ryan sees his friend Tebow as an old man,
and he verbally abuses Ryan.
Yes, and Earth is burning, and then he sees the creatures from Orphan 55 because that's going to come back. And then we have Graham in a hospital where he sees Grace.
And she verbally abuses him.
Right, and tells him that his cancer has returned, and why didn't you save me? So that's nightmarish.
I like his reaction. It's very human, and if I was in a dream, and I've dreamed about my wife many, 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 many times since she passed. In fact, that was one of the first things that started happening after she died, is I would dream about her, and I would dream about she's back, and then I would start questioning. It's like, wait, but you died. And she didn't want to talk about it. But I was having these dreams of she's back now. And because that was what I most wanted. And if she had said to me, why didn't you save me? I would have said exactly what Graham did. Let me try again.
Right. Right. That felt very real. Very real.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then we have the creepy guy. I was going to call him creepy guy for now. Who sees the doctor.
His name doesn't really mean anything anyway.
Right.
In fact, Storm's name doesn't even make it on screen, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
I just given a name in the credits.
Right. So he's Zelen, just to help to say it, because he tells her now. He says, I've watched you stumbling around the universe. He tells her his name is Zelen. The doctor says, no, you can't be him. That's a mythical name. Some people think that's a god. And this is where he says he's an eternal.
He says he's an immortal.
But the word eternal gets used.
Yes, no, it does. He says we immortals must play games to keep ourselves, and then he names as an example of immortals the Eternals and the Guardians and the Toymaker.
Okay,
right?
This is
so he doesn't lock himself into being any one of those three.
I gotcha. Okay, I got that wrong then. And then he mentions the Toymaker and the Guardians, and he admits he's taking nightmares from humans and transmitting them.
I like when the Doctor says that's from way beyond this universe. It's a myth. Zelen was thought to be a god, and he says, "I blush."
It was pretty good. Yes. He does admit to transmitting the nightmares from humans into the girl in the bubble. And there's some interesting lines here. He talks about humans, and what sets humans apart is the cruelty of their own minds directed at themselves. How he talks about human self-doubt and what is it? The where we think we're frauds, imposter syndrome, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And then humans are pathetic, and that sort of thing.
And this is a classic test in psychology where because everybody has insecurities, and we all put on a brave face for the world, and so psychiatrists have this test where it's allegedly based on you, but really it's based on everybody.
Right.
And they give it to you to see how much you identify with it. And it'll say things like, even though you put on a brave face, you sometimes secretly feel doubts. It's like, oh, that is so me. Yes, this test must be about me. No, this test is about everybody.
Yes, it's the dangers of freshman psychology courses where we self-diagnose. Yep. So he tells the Doctor, you've got everything all wrong. She's not a prisoner. I've manipulated you into coming here and freeing this girl, the woman. I keep calling her girl, but because she looked young to me when I first saw her, but it turns out she's an adult.
She's younger than Creepy Guy.
She is younger than him, but I manipulated into freeing her. That's what I wanted, because she is the more dangerous one of us. I just ride her coattails.
Right.
Should
mention, by the way, before this conversation started, the Doctor activated an app on her sonic screwdriver to hook up to the TARDIS's super mega ultra computer to do some quantum computing.
Right.
And start the calculations to free. Of course, the TARDIS computer, which one day is the super mega ultra computer, other days is about the equivalent of a Commodore 64. I mean, it depends on what they need for the plot, but still.
Right. Yeah. Right.
That leads to because she breaks the quantum lock, and that leads to a great moment of mutual one-upsmanship where the Doctor is like, I've used your technology against you to free this defenseless woman, and he's like, no, this isn't my technology. I've used your inclinations to get you here to free her.
Right. And this really, we're building up this enemy, these villains, to be super powerful here. That's important in a minute. But when Rakaya, that's the name of this woman, shows up.
And that doesn't even make it on screen, does it?
No, I'm just reading it.
I don't hear it.
She who is not to be named is what they should have called her.
Yes.
That's from an H. Rider Haggard novel.
Yes.
And a couple of movies, one of which stars Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. So Dueling Draculas in She.
That's right.
There you go.
Oh, and Bernard Cribbins is in that. Wilfred Mott.
We are fully on the tangent, but we're back. So what we get here then is this very interesting animated sequence where we get the exposition about who these people are and how Rakaya ended up in the quantum prison.
I saw this. I mean, this is the 1980s Laurie Anderson music video, Mr. Sharky's Day. I remember this.
It's somewhat primitive animation that
I kind of liked it though, is kind of that mythological storytelling, because it kind of pulled a lot of the ancient Greek style art and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of an interesting way to tell the story. Of course, they did it as it was a nightmare for the Doctor, where she zapped the Doctor and she saw this whole thing.
And Sharky says, I turn around and it's love. I turn around again and it's fear. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows my name. Because it doesn't make it on screen.
That's right. So it turns out that the two of them had come from wherever they came from and found take possession of these two planets and used them to amuse themselves, causing war and suffering. And when the people on the planets figured out what was going on,
let's play who can destroy a planet first.
Right. Yep. They were so it's like something out of the Book of Job, but except no good. There was no God there. There was just two devils.
Good God. Yeah.
Yeah. Just two devils. So they trapped the people of the planets, got together, and they trapped one of the two Eternals in this prison, the Rakaya, and the other one ran away until he could find the Doctor and get her free.
Yeah.
And so the nightmares that were being fed to her were not a punishment. They were what she needed. She lives off of the pain of others.
They were her Netflix.
Yeah, right.
She was binging on other people's nightmares. So let's talk about, since this is, a Catholic podcast network, let's talk about the theological implications of all of this.
Of course.
Because we have these two allegedly godlike beings. How does that square with stuff?
Yeah.
Well, the short answer is big deal. Historically, the term God used, and you even see this in Hebrew, where you have Elohim. It can refer to all kinds of different supernatural creatures, beings, I should say. You have the one true creator God at the top, who's infinite, but then you have, even in Hebrew, Elohim gets applied to finite, lesser deities that are either worshipped by the nations, like the gods of the Canaanites or the Egyptians, and it gets applied to angels as well, and maybe even to human spirits. When Samuel is summoned up by the witch of Endor after he's dead, she says, "I see an Elohim coming up from the earth." So it can even be, the term Elohim is so broad, it can even be applied to the spirits of deceased humans. In Greek and Latin, so in Greek, you have a somewhat different structure. You have theos is the term for God, and it gets applied both to like the great creator high God and to the lesser gods, like the gods of Olympus, like Zeus and Apollo and things like that. And then there is also another kind of creature that was sometimes classified as a god, but humans could manipulate. So you could, instead of like you need to beseech Apollo to do something, but you could kind of manipulate this other lower class spirit into doing what you want. And the word for that spirit was daimon. And this is where we get the English word demon. Now, in Greco-Roman mythology, demons were not always evil. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't, but they were lesser order beings that you could kind of whistle up and manipulate them into doing what you wanted. But they were sort of on the same spectrum as the theoi. So you have the high god at the top, then the intermediate gods, and then the little bitty servant spirits. And so proceeding from a Christian perspective, Zelen and she who is not to be named, aka Storm Aurora, who was worshipped as a god early on by pre-woke tribes in Africa in the comics, they would just be this intermediate category, like Apollo and Zeus. And so even though they get called gods, and it's like, okay, big deal. Finite being, not an infinite, eternal, all good creator. Right. I'm not that interested.
Yeah. Well, and it's
not in worshiping them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in English, you would see that when you look at English translation, you'll have the uppercase G God for the Father, and then lowercase G gods as the Greek gods and the Roman gods and so on.
Yeah. So this kind of God just means more powerful than a human, but not in any way comparable to the infinite God.
This could be either, if we want to, extend it in the Hooniverse, they could either be creatures created by God at the beginning of time who are essentially immortal in this place,
but have gone rogue like the devil did.
Yep. Or they could be angelic beings, spiritual beings that
demons, as we would call
that
them,
are demons. Yes,
but notice how finite they are. Zelen needs the Doctor to crack that quantum lock. He cannot do it himself.
Right. So probably the former then just created beings who are so powerful as to seem like gods to lesser creatures.
Right.
Yeah. Which
good.
Historically, humans were sometimes regarded as gods. Alexander the Great was, the king of Egypt always was. Even when Paul and Barnabas performed some miracles in one city, people thought, it's Mercury and Zeus. Let's bring out oxen and sacrifice to them.
Yeah.
So the Zelen and Rakaya, having freed themselves, now need to go find some new planet to be their plaything, and they decide that Earth is the place to go because they really dig our nightmares. So they head off to Earth, where they're going.
But first they put the doctor in a nightmare booth.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. They stick a finger in her ear, and she dreams of the timeless child. So we have a return to this vision from before, when we hear the master's voice repeating the things we heard in the Spyfall Part 2.
And we see a little more of this scene, and the doctor is standing there in front of the building with the timeless child. But we don't really get any new information. It's just we dwell on the moment a little longer.
Mm-hmm. There is some speculation. Why does the doctor dream of the timeless child here? Why is this her nightmare instead of the burning of Gallifrey, for instance, or any of the other things?
Well, I would assume it's because this thing is down in their memories and is suppressed for some reason,
right?
So I would assume for that reason alone. But also, it's also connected to the Ruth thing, and that's new and unsettling for her, and it led to the destruction of Gallifrey, and it's the most ominous thing that's been presented to her, because the Master presented this to her as, this is so important, it warranted me in offing Gallifrey.
Right.
Yeah.
This somehow wakes her. She wakes up, manages we don't have any reason why the nightmare fingers
because she uses Time Lord Big Brain. I mean, she's able to fight against the effects of the ear or the ear finger, I guess. I don't know.
I just took it as, this is what happens at the end of nightmares. As soon as a nightmare gets too scary for me, I instantly wake up. It's my defense mechanism.
Yeah, except nobody else is waking up, so she has to be different. Somehow she manages to get the Sonic from her inside pocket into her hand.
This is really, so her hands are bound above her head. She's got the Sonic in her pocket around her waist, and she's doing a coochie dance or something to somehow flip the Sonic up to where she can catch it. And this is spectacularly unsuccessful it works in story, but as a cinematic experience, it utterly fails. It would have been far better if she had just used the Force to levitate the thing up there.
Right.
See, at first when she started moving, I thought she was going to try to bump the button against the side wall. And then all of a sudden it did the Luke Skywalker leap up to her hand. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then she activated and chopped off the Wampa's arm and got out of the ice cave.
Well, it does. You don't need, she's telepathic, and it has a point and think interface. So that it could have just given her a line of exposition. It's like, okay, think, how can I get this up here? Yeah. I'm telepathic. It has a point and think interface. Okay. Whoop, task accomplished. You know?
Right. Yeah. So that was, but we needed her to escape quickly, and so they did. And she gets everyone else out, and they confront the question: how do you defeat two rampaging immortals? Well, you don't. You just have to stick them back in the box. Is the answer. Back on Earth, everyone's nightmares are coming alive. Especially the mother putting the daughter to bed. There's no such thing as the boogeyman. Then he shows up and goes, "Yes, there is."
Yes, actually, that's not true. And then Storm is standing in the middle of the street, and she's using her weather powers to draw all these tendrils of smoke into her from all the houses on the street. And apparently that's the nightmares.
See, and the reason you keep calling her Storm is just for I think everyone, I'm sure has seen the episode, but it's because they've made her look like Storm with the white hair, and she's of dark complected, of African ancestry. I mean,
even her clothes are kind of similar in design to Storm.
Yeah.
She's a black woman with white hair, and she's got this weird African-looking collar thing on her, and she's got these whitish clothes, this whitish costume that looks kind of like something Storm would wear.
Yes, yeah, it's very obvious. It's really weird. So the Doctor lures the Eternals back to Aleppo in 1380 with using the creature from Tahira's nightmare. I'm not sure how this worked. I'm not sure what happened here. Again, lack of exposition and explanation.
He said,
go ahead, Father.
Vellum said he could hear him through the space waves or something like,
Yeah.
And so I don't know if the Doctor like amplified the creature's call through the TARDIS or.
Yeah, so what the Doctor realized was that the ceiling hugging monkey bears are projections that Zelen had created out of the Thief of Aleppo's nightmares, and so that's why they don't really exist. That's why they're not in any database, even though they give them a name, which they don't need to if they're one-off projections.
Right.
I don't need a name for a one-off projection, but she then realized that's why they couldn't kill Tahira, because then they would be cutting off their source of existence if they're manifestations of her nightmares. So she can actually control them because they're her nightmares. And so the Doctor has taught her in the intervening off-screen sequences to face her fears and control them. So now she's in control of the monkey bears and can use them to call out to Zelen, possibly over the time waves using the TARDIS, and thus lure Zelen and Storm back to Aleppo so we can spring our fiendish plan on them.
Which all happens off screen, as you said.
Yes.
And so they quite easily then get them back in the quantum box, like just boom. And we have
what's your worst nightmare?
Right. And
they bring a piece of technology with them that's apparently the control for the Christmas ornament that Storm was trapped in.
Right.
And so they use the Christmas ornament controller which is telepathic, I guess, and threaten them with the monkey bear and say, what's your worst nightmare? And they and the monkey bear both get trapped in the Christmas ornament.
And that's it. Boom. We're done.
Boom. Yep. 9 minutes left to go in the show.
And so this is, as I said to my wife, Melanie, literally Deus Ex Machina, like literally God in the box. And why? Like, it just was too easy.
Well,
we
God
create
from
this
the machine.
We have, we have, God in the machine. Sorry. But we have this ultra powerful enemy we've created that they cannot be defeated. They're immortals. And we have to figure out a way to defeat them very quickly because we want to save the last 9 minutes for all this other stuff.
For our mental health care PSA.
Now before we get to that, I do say I don't have as much a problem with this if the idea is to bring them back later. If this is a one-off, we never see them again, then I agree with that. Yeah. But if this is something that they are planning to bring back in the future, I don't have so much a problem. I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, the device that's going to trap them is going to be something that's going to trap them fairly easily. Right. You don't want to make it a big, difficult thing to catch these immortals and trap them.
Yeah. And since Zelen is in there himself now, they can't get out again for all eternity is the thesis. Right. Although they don't make that explicit. I have in my notes, and I took this note at the time that Storm was feeding off the smoke tendrils from the houses, that, this was getting so dramatic and so ramped up, and they're going to use Earth for all eternity to feed their nightmare needs and stuff like that. It's like this, I have in my notes, threat level too high for a 50-minute episode. Yeah. And what I meant by that is this needs to be a two-parter. We need to see the reign of terror of these two evil creatures, and taking them down needs to be hard. Given what they've staked, they've ramped everything up to the point. We need to dwell on this. You don't create super omnipotent threats and then snap your fingers and have it go away. But that's exactly what they do. They abort the reign of terror and they just snap their fingers and they're back in the Christmas ornament, and it feels dramatically malformed.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. It felt anticlimactic to me. I'm like, oh, we're ramping up, and then that's it. Like, I'm like, that was, as to quote The Simpsons, well, that wrapped up nicely, pretty quickly, faster than usual. It was, and in fact, it felt like that because now we have a 9-minute PSA about mental health. Literally, yeah. I mean, apparently the BBC, in fact, ended during the credits, had an action line about, a statement about if you have any mental health issues, call this number, like, which is fine. I don't have a problem with there being this message embedded in the story. I'm fine with that. We've talked about this recently in recent episodes. It's when it's so ham-fisted that feels awkward.
Well, and Bennett Gillespie sent us a message last night on our Facebook channel, basically saying that this past week was Children's Mental Health Week in Great Britain, and so that's where this connection is coming in. This is kind of the end of that. So you can imagine there are probably many other shows on BBC and both ITV as well, perhaps, that kind of tied into this as well.
Yeah, well, on this very special episode of Doctor Who,
yes, exactly.
We have some bad writing at the end, because suddenly it comes out of nowhere in the last 9 minutes that Ryan's friend, Tim Tebow, who has been very justified in all of his paranoia, given that an extra universal evil demigod has been haunting his dreams and appearing to him in real life, he has every reason to be concerned. Suddenly, it turns out he's also a mental health patient.
Right.
And Ryan recommends that he goes to a support group. And
they did hint at it one line very briefly, where Ryan walks into his kitchen, and the kitchen's a disaster. He says, "What's wrong? This place is normally immaculate. It's normally spotless."
Well,
and
I'm
of course,
not
the kitchen's
sleeping
got
and
plates
seeing
and food and everything. Yeah.
I'm not sleeping and seeing waking nightmares, but
exactly.
That doesn't establish mental illness. That just establishes that he's under stress, and he is. So this was not properly set up in the episode, that this guy has mental health issues. If you want to make your mental health statement, you need to make it obvious, like in Vincent and the Doctor, from the outset, that somebody has mental issues if you want to pay it off.
Gosh, that was a much better episode.
Yeah. Then we get more info on the Yaz situation, and this is another thing. Even her sister, I've seen her sister so little that I had a hard time when she's having her nightmare about being on the road and seeing her sister. Is that her sister? Because they didn't even put her in the same clothes.
Right.
No.
And it's like, I need, for characters I barely know, I need something to distinguish them, that I can say, okay, this is the person with the red hair, and this is the person with the green jacket, and stuff like. If I don't know somebody, I need a visual cue like that.
Or use their name in dialogue.
Sonia,
what are you doing here? Oh, that's Sonia.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or, hey, sis, something to establish a relationship. And that was a recurring thing in this episode. We didn't get enough character identification traits. But then we get more context on Yaz. We get 3 years earlier on the screen, and Yaz is walking down the same road we saw earlier. Her sister is not there, but the policewoman we saw earlier shows up and says, hey, they're really worried about you. Right. And apparently Yaz has run away. Her sister is afraid that she's been bullied at school, which was mentioned in the Witchfinders, apparently. Her grades have been sliding. She's run away, and her sister is afraid she may do something stupid, i.e. kill herself. And and
they do play kind of the phone call of, I don't know who else to call. The sister calling the police, say, I don't know who else to call.
Right. Well, fortunately, there's a number coming up in the post credits at the end of this episode. But the police lady gives her a talking to in a very nice, sympathetic way, and even makes a bet with her that, look, I'll give you, this is just a moment. I bet this is just a moment. You'll be fine. Don't run away, do anything stupid. Carry on with your life. Keep calm and carry on. Yep. And if 3 years from now I'm right, I'll give you 50 pounds. But if you're right, you give me 50 pence.
Right.
So that's a good bet.
Reverse that. It was if Yaz is right, the policewoman will give her 50 pounds. If the policewoman's right, Yaz will give her.
That's what I said.
You said the other way around.
Okay. In any event, it's a bet to Yaz's favor, and we then see 3 years later, she shows up and gives the police lady 50 pence, and the police lady invites her in, and it is it's heartwarming. And I thought, that aspect of the writing was fine. I thought it was misplaced.
Yeah.
Because it's suddenly pulling this out, and this doesn't justify an anniversary dinner.
No.
remember the day you ran away? Let's all, and you made that bet with that cop. Let's have an anniversary dinner every year about that. That's crazy.
Yeah. I suppose it could be this, the day you were reborn, when you got a new lease on life. Maybe, but then when you're 16,
an awkward anniversary, it would be something to It would be something to celebrate.
Right. It's kind of awkward. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought this episode was too on the nose again. They needed to set this stuff up earlier. It was nowhere near as bad as on the nose as Orphan 55. Right. We didn't get a fourth wall breaking speech by the characters. We then get Graham talking to the doctor in the TARDIS about his fears about cancer. And that was totally realistic.
Yes.
That was bang on. That was good writing. He's saying, I don't know who else to talk to, so I thought I'd tell you. And that's true. We all have things we need to say to just somebody, just to get it off our chest. And the doctor looks at him and says, I should say something reassuring now, shouldn't I?
Right. I'm socially awkward and can't think of anything to say.
Yeah, I'm going to go over here and look at the TARDIS control for a minute, and then in a minute I'll think of something I should have said that might have been comforting. And he's like, okay.
Yeah. Apparently, a lot of fans did not like this. They thought that this made the doctor seem cold, cruel, or made socially awkward people look bad. I was
think
fine.
It was part of the character because they played that she's still very socially awkward. I mean, for things like this.
What was the problem for me a little bit, but since I also think like a writer, I can kind of live with it, is she's got advanced technology. She can probably make sure his cancer never returns.
I thought exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Or at minimum have every time he's in the TARDIS, it's scanning for it.
Right. Or just scan him and say, look, not a trace of it. See, I can scan you instantaneously.
It's not going to come back. I've just sonicked you, and there's no trace of mutations in your DNA, and it'll have to re-evolve all over again. That won't happen for another 70 years for you.
Right. Yep. So now, and then after that, we have Yaz and Ryan talking to each other about, Ryan's like, how long are we going to be with the doctor? How long are we going to go on? And Ryan is really expressing this fear, which he saw in his nightmare, about how his friends are going to go on without him. He's changing, and his friend, they're aging at different rates, and he's changing and growing apart from them. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching this, are they preparing Ryan to leave the show?
The actor Tosin Cole has recently gotten a big role on an American television series, and there is a good chance that is exactly what they are doing.
Right.
And if so, I want to give him credit for coming up with a plausible on-screen setup for it in advance, as opposed to Melanie Bush suddenly falls in love with a psychopathic pirate and decides to leave.
Exactly. Right. And as far as I know, at least at this point, it's only been publicly announced that the doctor is coming back.
Right.
Jodie Whittaker is coming back. We don't know about the companions yet.
Yeah. And I hope they keep Graham and Yaz, because Graham, is my clear favorite, and Yaz is my second favorite. Ryan has always been my least favorite because he mopes all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
If he didn't mope all the time, he would be more fun as a character.
The few moments that he has where he's really showing off, he is kind of fun. I like that where they're playing the FIFA and he's cheering about how he's the greatest and he hasn't lost it. And
right. And Ryan gets a lot of the masculine action moments. I mean, just the physical action that we can't get carried off by the doctor or
the Ian Chesterton
Graham
moments.
Yes. So
we have kind of a downer ending, except the doctor comes in and says, I was just thinking Frankenstein.
Right. And that's going to lead to next week.
And we're off, and it's like, yay, I know exactly where we're going.
Right.
Because so Frankenstein is not a real monster in the Whoniverse, so that means they're going to go to Mary Shelley. Right. Now, they're causing a bit of a paradox with the extended literature, because in the extended literature, the Eighth Doctor actually has Mary Shelley as a companion for a while. So this is going to be an alternate timeline or a time can be rewritten thing. But we're heading to 1816, the year without a summer, because in 1815, Mount Tambor blew up
sure.
and caused a temporary global winter. So 1816 was known as the year without a summer, or 1800 and froze to death. And in that year, Mary Shelley, along with her not quite yet husband, and visited Lord Byron in a villa at Lake Geneva in Switzerland, and to pass along with his Lord Byron's physician Polidori, and to pass the time during the dreadful weather caused by Mount Tambora, they decided to tell stories, which led to Polidori writing the first modern vampire story, The Vampire, and it led to Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein, the postmodern Prometheus. And so...
And by the way, Lord Byron should sound familiar because earlier this season we met his daughter, Ada.
Right. Yeah.
Ada Lovelace. Right.
So, yay! I'm all for going
this could be a good one.
To 1816, and the name of the villa that they rented was the Villa Diodati, which means the villa that was given by God. And so the title of the next episode is The Haunting of the Villa Diodati.
Nice.
So before we wrap up, I do want to kind of go back and tie up the loose ends on just a few things on this episode, which is I want to mention with Yaz and her nightmare, which wasn't really much of a nightmare. It was, in fact, while everyone else is processing Ryan and his fears of losing his friends and Graham and his fear of cancer, Yaz seems at peace. And I guess that's because she's already faced her fears. That's what they're trying to say in this, in this nightmare she has.
At least that particular, revisiting that particular event of her running away.
Right. So I guess it wasn't, again, one of these things where there wasn't clear on that. But in general, like I wanted to kind of talk about in general how we felt about this episode. In general, like as I said before, I liked this. I liked it a little better than even the last time when we had the what was the last one? Last week's episode.
Plastic eating
Praxeus.
virus.
Sorry, thank you.
Praxeus.
Yeah, I had a senior moment there. So Praxeus, I liked it better than Praxeus. But where we had some more what we expect from Doctor Who, the running around stuff. What I didn't like is how this felt bolted on. This after part got bolted on and truncated the primary story about defeating these villains, and that felt clunky to me. And
I hate to say it, that's probably exactly what happened. Was they took this story, realized it was going to be at this, or set it on this point, said, "Well, we got to add something to tie in with this mental health week." So there it is.
Right.
I don't know that I liked it better than Praxeus. I think, especially in hindsight, it is not going to age well because of it aborts the primary dramatic momentum of the episode in exchange for a 9-minute PSA about mental health that has not even been properly set up.
Right.
Vincent and the Doctor, where Vincent is fighting a monster that is a surrogate for mental illness, is a vastly better mental health episode than this was.
Right.
And so I wasn't offended by this episode. I didn't mind this episode. I mean, and by offended, I don't mean morally. I mean in terms of dramatic sensibilities. Right. I wasn't offended by it, but it was wonky. It had a lot of promise. I liked the fact they did twists like the mutual one-upsmanship with the Doctor and Zelen.
Yeah.
I liked the risk-taking in the stories, like that in the story that they were doing. That's fine, including the Laurie Anderson animation from the 1980s. But overall, it was fine, but it was flawed. It was not as on the nose as Orphan 55, but it was pretty on the nose in a way that didn't get properly set up. But if you ignore that, the rest of it was pretty entertaining.
Father Corey, any final thoughts on this one?
Well, like I said in the beginning, I mean, setting aside the part talking about the PSA and all that, I mean, it really was shaping up as a good classic Doctor Who monster of the week. We got to vanquish the monster. So.
Okay.
I should probably also explain PSA means public service announcement in this context.
Yeah. I also call it after school special.
I also want to point out, talking about, of course, talking about other things. Did you happen to notice that the prison power spear looked exactly like the Auton meteor from Spearhead from Space?
Oh,
yeah. It was like only like glowing blue.
Yeah. Right. That's true. That's true. Interesting. Wonder if that was intentional. We'll see. All right. So if there's nothing else, I do want to take a moment before we wrap things up. I want to, very important to thank.
Actually, before that, just for folks who may be wondering, because not everyone is plugged into the literature as we may be, they've announced the titles for final 2 episodes, and they are clearly going to be dealing with plot lines that they set up earlier this season. Yep. So after The Haunting of the Villa Deodati, we're going to have a 2-part finale. The first part is called Ascension of the Cybermen. Mm-hmm. So they will clearly be following up on the lone Cyberman thread. And then the second part of the finale is called the Timeless Children.
Children,
and
plural.
So plural. So they're gonna be exploring that. First pass is the Doctor and the Master are the 2 timeless children, but maybe it may be broader than that. Mm-hmm. Also, as I had suggested, there may be some connection between the destruction of the Cyber Empire and the destruction of Gallifrey and attempts to undo those, and it looks like they may be moving in that direction. If what they've said is a 2-part finale involves both the Cybermen and the Timeless Children who are from Gallifrey.
Very good. So that to look forward to. 3 more to go, folks. So we do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including this time we're thanking Julia S., Sean M., Elliot B., Sean, and Greg O. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them in supporting us by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of this episode called Can You Hear Me? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/Doctor Who or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or you can send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And, of course, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the aforementioned The Haunting of the Villa Deodati. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, humans live with their fears. They face them down every day, and they prevail.